There is a quiet moment that hits harder than failure. It is the moment you wake up, check your phone, and realize no one called, no one texted, no one noticed you were struggling. You are not hated. You are not rejected. You are simply unnecessary. You go to work, do your job, pay your bills, and still feel invisible. You share an idea and watch eyes drift away. You talk about your goals and hear polite silence. You come home tired, not dramatic tired, but the deep kind that comes from carrying everything alone, and no one asks how you are really doing. This is not a breakdown scene. This is a slow understanding settling into your chest. The world is not coming to save you. That realization scares most people because it removes excuses. You cannot blame bad luck, your parents, your boss, or the economy anymore. There is no villain to fight, no hand to hold, just you and the space you stand in. It feels unfair at first. You wonder why others seem supported while you operate in silence. But here is the truth most people avoid. Being ignored hurts more than being criticized, because criticism at least means you matter. This moment forces a choice. You can wait and hope someone eventually sees you, or you can accept that no one is coming and decide what kind of person that reality will shape. The hardest moment is not failing publicly. It is standing alone quietly, realizing the weight is yours, and understanding that whatever happens next depends entirely on what you do after this point. This video begins here, not to comfort you, but to hold up a mirror and ask whether you will keep waiting or finally move without permission, starting today, on purpose. Society teaches you a simple story. If you want to go far, you need support. You need a team, encouragement, people who believe in you. That idea sounds comforting, but it hides an uncomfortable truth most adults learn too late. Support is rarely free. It usually arrives with expectations, timelines, opinions, and quiet pressure to stay manageable. If you've ever felt slowed down by people who claim to support you, comment, "Support has a price." Your family says they care, but what they really want is for you to be safe, predictable, and close enough not to scare them. They support the version of you that fits their comfort, not the version that risks everything. Friends say they are happy for you, yet their energy shifts when you start moving faster. They clap, but softer. They joke, but sharper. Not because they are evil, but because your growth forces them to confront their own stagnation. Support often slows you down before it ever lifts you up. Every explanation costs energy. Every compromise dulls urgency. You begin adjusting your vision so others feel included, and suddenly, the goal that once felt alive starts to feel heavy. This is why so many capable people stay stuck while surrounded by encouragement. They are not failing from lack of help. They are being quietly managed by it. There is a strange freedom in having no one to reassure you. Silence gives you speed. Silence lets you make decisions without negotiation. Silence does not ask you to justify your ambition or soften your edge. Help often comes with strings. Silence does not. That does not mean support is bad. It means unexamined support can become a leash. Before you move forward, you have to see this clearly. Not to resent the people around you, but to understand why walking alone sometimes moves you farther than being carried ever could. This understanding changes how you interpret loneliness, not as rejection, but as space where momentum can finally build without friction or permission from others. This is where the frame has to change, quietly but completely. 500 years ago, Machiavelli was not teaching manipulation, he was teaching survival. His core idea was simple and uncomfortable. A person who depends on others for momentum will always move at someone else's pace. A prince who relies on borrowed forces never truly rules. That principle still applies, just without crowns or armies. This is not about becoming cold or ruthless. It is about refusing to outsource your future. When you wait for support, you are placing your progress inside variables you cannot control. Moods change, people hesitate, priorities shift, and every shift delays you. Lack of support does not mean you were abandoned. It means you are unowned. No one can pull the plug on your effort. No one can withdraw belief and watch you collapse. You answer to reality, not approval. Think about the coworker who needs constant validation before acting, or the friend who freezes without encouragement. When support disappears, so does their drive. Contrast that with someone who learned to move without applause. They do not panic when silence shows up. Silence is normal to them. Freedom begins where dependency ends. If no one carries you, no one owns you. This is the quiet advantage most people miss. Without support, you owe no explanations, no compromises, no emotional interest payments. You move when you decide. You stop when you choose. That does not make you heartless. It makes you sovereign. And sovereignty is not loud. It is calm. It is the ability to keep moving even when no one is watching or clapping. Building momentum alone on purpose, but without asking permission from anyone else. When you stop waiting for support, you enter an empty stretch most people are never taught how to survive. The noise fades, the messages slow down, and suddenly you are alone with your thoughts. This is where loneliness shows its real shape. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just quiet and heavy. You start questioning yourself at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if maybe you misread everything. Maybe you are not special. Maybe they were right. Maybe this path is a mistake. You feel the urge to reach out, not for help, but for reassurance. Just one reply. Just one sign that you matter. This is the danger zone. Not because you are weak, but because the human brain hates uncertainty more than pain. Most people run back to the crowd here. Manx, they accept smaller lives just to feel warm again. They stay busy, stay agreeable, stay surrounded, even if it costs them years. But this phase is not punishment. It is exposure. With no noise, your patterns become visible. Your excuses lose cover. You begin to notice how often you look to others to confirm your choices. Loneliness isn't weakness. It's the price of clarity. Think of the person who quits the gym because no one goes with them, or the aspiring creator who stops posting because friends stopped liking their work. They were never chasing progress. They were chasing witnesses. When you walk alone, you confront the uncomfortable truth that belief has to come from you first. This phase hurts because it removes emotional cushioning. There is no buffer between effort and doubt, but there is also no interference. Over time, something shifts. The silence stops accusing you and starts sharpening you. You learn to sit with discomfort without negotiating your direction. You build internal proof instead of external validation. This is where real self-trust is forged, slowly and privately. It often shows up in ordinary moments. Cooking alone, driving without music, finishing a day with no one to report to. That silence tests your discipline and your honesty. You either numb it with distractions or you use it to see yourself clearly. One choice keeps you average. The other slowly rebuilds you from the inside, without applause or rescue, and forces patience before confidence arrives, teaching endurance long before results appear publicly anywhere else. If this feels familiar, comment, "I feel this," below, not for attention, but to acknowledge that you recognize this phase and that you are still standing inside it. choosing not to turn back. Success without support requires a different mindset and a cleaner strategy. This is not about motivation or hype, but about removing dependency, noise, and wasted motion. When no one is watching, your habits matter more than your intentions. When no one is helping, your systems decide everything. These strategies are built for people moving quietly, carrying their own weight, and choosing progress over approval, even when the path feels uncomfortable, lonely, and slow. This approach rewards patience, discipline, and long-term focus. At some point, you realize talking has been costing you more than failing ever did. Every explanation leaks energy. Every early conversation turns intention into performance. You describe the plan, people react, and your nervous system relaxes as if the work already happened. Motivation fades because the pressure escaped. Then the comments arrive. Some sound supportive. Some sound cautious. A few plant doubt without meaning to. You start editing the vision to sound reasonable. This is how ambition gets diluted. You have seen it before. A coworker announces a side business and never launches. A friend talks about changing their life and slowly stops trying. Words gave them relief, then stole their edge. Early feedback creates noise before momentum exists. The answer is not secrecy from fear. It is silence by design. When no one knows what you are building, tension has nowhere to go. It stays inside and turns into focus. Silence isn't hiding, it's loading. Think about the person who quietly learned a skill for months and then changed careers without warning. Or the one who never mentioned a fitness plan and suddenly looked different. No debate, no validation, just results. Silence protects momentum from interference. It removes the need to defend choices to people who are not carrying the cost. Without an audience, you stop performing and start producing. Confidence changes shape. Instead of borrowing belief, you earn it through repetition. Silence also gives you privacy to fail. You can adjust, restart, and refine without embarrassment. That freedom compounds. Over time, action replaces explanation as your reflex. You stop asking if something will work and start testing it. You stop seeking reassurance and start collecting evidence. When you finally speak, the tone is different. You are not selling potential, you are stating reality. People feel the weight because substance exists. Silence sharpens intent, preserves energy, and lets effort compound without spectators, which is often the fastest way to move when too many opinions once slowed you down. This matters most for people who have been overlooked, underestimated, or drowned in advice. When support is loud, it often replaces urgency with comfort. When silence is chosen, urgency stays alive. Building quietly is not arrogance. It is respect for the process. You let outcomes speak before opinions interfere, and that discipline becomes a long-term advantage over time. It separates serious builders from talkers who never execute consistently anyway. Then, when you stop explaining what you are doing, something else shifts quietly. You stop waiting, stop negotiating, stop moving at the speed of other people's comfort. Silence does not only protect your energy, it removes friction. And when friction disappears, speed becomes possible. Being alone feels like a disadvantage until you notice how fast you can move without anyone slowing you down. No meetings to schedule, no approvals to collect, no opinions to manage. Decisions happen immediately, and action follows without delay. This is where solitude turns into leverage. Large organizations talk about agility, but most of their time is spent aligning egos, managing politics, and protecting roles. A simple change can take months because too many people need reassurance first. do not have that burden. You can wake up with one idea and pivot by nightfall. That difference compounds quickly. Think about a big company trying to change direction. Committees debate, emails circulate, risk teams hesitate. 6 months pass before execution begins. Now compare that to a single person working alone. They test, scrap, rebuild, and relaunch in one evening. No permission required, no reputation to defend, just movement. Speed is power when you have no support. It allows you to learn faster than people who are smarter but slower. It allows you to outmaneuver competitors with more resources but less flexibility. Look at freelancers who out-earn entire teams because they adapt faster, or creators who shift platforms early because they do not need consensus. Their advantage is not talent. It is responsiveness. Being alone also sharpens responsibility. There is no one else to blame when something fails. Feedback is immediate and personal. That forces clarity. You see results fast, good or bad, and adjust without excuses. Over time, confidence forms through experience, not theory. Speed does not mean rushing blindly. It means removing delay between decision and action. When you operate solo, friction disappears. You are not managing feelings or politics. You are building momentum through repeated movement. This is how smaller players beat bigger ones, not by overpowering them, but by moving before they finish talking. Loneliness hurts emotionally, but strategically it creates space. Space to think clearly, space to act decisively, space to change direction without apology. When support is absent, speed replaces reassurance. And speed, used consistently, becomes a weapon that turns solitude into an advantage most people never learn to use. When speed becomes your advantage, another problem appears quickly. No one is cheering for you. No reminders, no encouragement. On quiet days, quitting feels reasonable. This is where most people fall apart, not from lack of talent, but from lack of structure. Motivation is unreliable when you are alone. It rises and disappears without warning. If your progress depends on how you feel, consistency dies. The solution is not hype or discipline speeches. It is protocol. A protocol removes emotion from execution. It tells you what happens regardless of mood. You wake up and follow a fixed sequence. Morning is for output before distraction. Work is deep, timed, and uninterrupted. Evening is for review, not judgment. You do not ask yourself if you feel inspired. You ask one question only. Did I execute? Think about athletes who train even when no one is watching, or business owners who show up on empty days. They are not more motivated. They are more structured. Protocol replaces encouragement with inevitability. When there is no support, rules protect you from negotiation with yourself. Without protocol, you wake up and debate. Should I rest? Should I wait? Should I start tomorrow? With protocol, there is nothing to debate. Action is automatic. This matters because loneliness amplifies excuses. When no one will notice, skipping feels harmless. Protocol closes that gap. It creates accountability inside the system instead of outside. Over time, this builds trust with yourself. You stop relying on emotion and start relying on evidence. Days stack. Work accumulates. Identity shifts quietly. Discipline is not punishment. It is relief. It frees you from decision fatigue and self-persuasion. When motivation disappears, the protocol still runs. That is the difference between people who survive alone and people who stall. They do not feel stronger. They operate cleaner. And clean execution, repeated daily, becomes the foundation that holds everything together when no one is clapping, watching, or reminding you why you started. Consistency created this way. looks boring from the outside, but it compounds quietly. While others wait for motivation to return, you move forward by default. This is how momentum survives isolation. Structure replaces excitement, process replaces hope, and over time, the discipline you once resisted becomes the reason you are no longer dependent on anyone else to keep going. It turns effort into habit, habit into identity, and identity into long-term self-reliance permanently. After structure replaces motivation and results begin to form, the next mistake is trying to convert effort into approval too early. You are told to put yourself out there, attend events, ask for introductions, and build relationships before results exist. But networking without value is just begging with better manners. You are asking for attention, favors, or belief before you have proof. People sense that immediately. It creates imbalance. They hold leverage. You hold need. That dynamic kills momentum and self-respect. The alternative is harder, but cleaner. You build depth before visibility. You choose one skill that actually moves the needle, and you work it until your output speaks for you. Think of the freelancer who stopped pitching and spent months mastering one software. Then suddenly clients came through referrals. Or the junior employee who stayed quiet, solved problems no one else touched, and became impossible to ignore during layoffs. Their network did not save them. Their competence did. When results exist, conversations change. You are no longer asking to be seen. You are being sought. This is why depth beats exposure early on. Shallow visibility attracts noise. Deep capability attracts opportunity. Building in silence protects focus and compounds credibility. It also removes desperation from your tone. You stop chasing rooms and start becoming someone rooms want. Be undeniable, and support becomes optional. That does not mean people will not help you. It means help is no longer required for progress. This mindset flips the power dynamic. You decide who to work with instead of waiting to be chosen. Results replace introductions. Proof replaces persuasion. When you walk into a conversation with evidence, you do not need to sell yourself. Your work already did. This approach feels slow at first, especially when others seem connected and busy. But speed without substance collapses. Depth holds. Over time, undeniable skill becomes a magnet. Opportunities arrive quietly. Support shows up late after the risk is gone. And that is fine, because by then, you are no longer dependent on it. You are moving because you can, not because someone opened a door. This phase requires patience, because recognition lags behind execution, and loneliness can trick you into rushing visibility too soon. But staying private allows competence to mature fully, turning uncertainty into quiet confidence that does not depend on praise, likes, meetings, or external reassurance from others around you at this stage. If you are building something quietly right now, comment the skill you're building in silence, not for validation, but to mark commitment to the process that actually changes outcomes. Stability attracts attention in ways that feel uncomfortable rather than flattering. Messages start appearing from people who are absent during your most uncertain seasons, and the tone is casual, almost as if nothing was missed. This moment creates internal tension because part of you wants recognition, and another part remembers the silence clearly. Acting from either place hands control away. Reopening doors for validation pulls you backward. Closing them with resentment keeps you emotionally tied to the past. The stronger response is neutral distance. You acknowledge without reconnecting. You reply without reattaching. Think of the friend who disappeared while you were struggling financially and resurfaced once progress became visible. Or the former coworker who questioned your direction and now wants to catch up after your position improves. They are not villains. They are responding to signals. People move toward stability and away from uncertainty. Understanding this removes bitterness and replaces it with clarity. The goal is not punishment, it is calibration. Distance is not punishment, it's calibration. Access adjusts based on consistency, not shared history. Polite does not mean available. Respectful does not mean close. You can be civil without reopening emotional access. You can be kind without sharing space that once drained you. This boundary protects the version of you that was built without applause or reassurance. Letting everyone back into your inner circle weakens the structure that carried you through isolation. Think of distance as a volume dial rather than a locked door. Some people remain faint background noise. Some stay outside entirely. None require confrontation or explanation. Silence handles it cleanly. Over time, resentment fades because expectation fades with it. You stop hoping people will recognize your struggle and start responding to patterns as they are. Those who were absent remain peripheral. Those who showed consistency earn proximity. Everyone else stays at a measured distance. This is not coldness. It is self-respect. Handling return without ego preserves momentum because it prevents emotional regression. You do not reopen old negotiations or relive abandoned seasons. You move forward with standards instead of sentiment. Calm boundaries signal growth. They protect focus, maintain discipline, and keep your future from being shaped by people who only arrived once the hardest work was already done. Going alone was never the final destination. It was the filter. Machiavelli understood this better than most, and this is where his insight matters one last time. He was not anti-society, nor did he romanticize isolation. He warned against dependence. He believed power begins with self-reliance, because only then can alliances be chosen instead of accepted out of fear. Walking alone strips illusions. It shows who stays consistent, who disappears, and who only approaches when safety returns. That information is priceless. After you become stable, disciplined, and capable, relationships change shape. You are no longer searching for rescue or validation. You are evaluating alignment. This is the difference between loneliness and selectivity. Loneliness reaches for company to escape discomfort. Selectivity waits until strength exists. Think of the entrepreneur who built quietly for years, then chose partners who complemented skills instead of filling emotional gaps. Or the professional who stopped chasing mentors and attracted them through results. These connections work because they are optional, not necessary. Machiavelli's lesson was simple. A wise leader chooses allies from a position of strength, never from need. The same applies here. You do not reject people. You rank proximity. You allow access based on consistency, competence, and shared direction. This is not cruelty. It is precision. Choosing fewer people reduces noise and increases leverage. It protects focus and preserves momentum. After stability, companionship becomes additive instead of distracting. You stop tolerating relationships that drain energy or slow decisions. You stop confusing familiarity with loyalty. Walking alone first teaches discernment. It trains you to value your time, your attention, and your standards. Only then does connection become strategic instead of soothing. The goal was never isolation. The goal was sovereignty. From that position, collaboration becomes powerful because it is chosen freely, not to avoid loneliness, not to feel safe, but to build something that requires more than one capable person, standing together by choice. You are not weak for walking this path. You are building a foundation most people never touch. The quiet years were not wasted years. They were structural. while others leaned on reassurance. You learned to stand. While others waited for permission, you learned to move. Nothing about this journey was accidental. It trained patience, discipline, and judgment under pressure. No one came, so you became. That sentence is not a slogan. It is a summary of lived experience. Solitude was never the enemy. Dependence was. Depending on approval, comfort, timing, or rescue keeps people small. You stepped out of that loop. You learned how to generate momentum internally, protect energy through silence, move fast without permission, execute without motivation, build value before visibility, and choose distance without bitterness. These skills do not disappear when people arrive later. They stay with you. That is the real win. You are no longer chasing support. You are deciding what deserves access. This does not make you cold. It makes you calibrated. The world will eventually respond to strength, but you no longer need that response to continue. That is autonomy. You know how to work without applause. You know how to think without consensus. You know how to stand alone without collapsing inward. That is rare, and rare things carry weight. From here, connection becomes optional, not necessary. Collaboration becomes a choice, not a crutch. The foundation you built quietly allows you to scale without losing yourself. Remember this the next time silence returns. It is not a signal to stop. It is proof you can continue. You are not behind. You are early in a process that most people never complete. No one came, so you became. If this resonated, comment "I stopped waiting" to mark the moment you chose movement over delay. And subscribe if you want to understand power without becoming bitter. Because clarity beats resentment, discipline beats anger, and self-rule outlasts every shortcut. This commitment is not loud or dramatic, but it compounds daily, shaping decisions, relationships, and direction. Until independence feels normal, calm, and unshakable, even under pressure. It becomes the quiet advantage that keeps you moving forward long after motivation fades and circumstances change without panic, shortcuts, or dependence from anyone else at any stage of life.